afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Syracuse Sport Business Conference Digital Series for episode 21. For those of you joining us for the first time, we welcome you back to the show. Or for the first time, we welcome you to today's episode and hope this brings you back for more in the future. My name is François Bourgonet, and I'm one of the sponsorship coordinators here at the SSBC, and I'm very lucky to have the chance to moderate today's episode with our amazing guest. Joining us on the other end is the man we've proclaimed as the media mastermind of mixed martial arts. 9-time MMA Journalist of the Year and 04 Newhouse graduate, Ariel Helwani. Ariel, thank you so much for being on.
Oh, it is my pleasure. Thank you, Francois. And mastermind is a very interesting way to describe me. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'll take it as a compliment, but it is an honor to do anything affiliated with Syracuse, especially with a fellow Canadian, a fellow Montrealer. I mean, my worlds are colliding here, so I'm very excited. Thank you for having me.
I mean, we're so lucky to have, a great alum like you. They're so able to give back and wanting to give back like you, and an organization like us can only benefit from people and names like you. So we thank you. So Ariel graduated from Newhouse with a degree in broadcast journalism and is now a senior journalist, host, and reporter for all things MMA at ESPN. He's worked as the lead UFC insider for Fox Sports 1, as well as covering MMA for a number of other networks and media outlets such as NBC, Wasserman Media Group, as well as his own website. His current shows and podcasts at ESPN include the Ariel Helwani MMA Show, DC and Helwani, as well as Ariel and the Bad Guy with UFC legends Daniel Cormier and Chael Sonnen, inviting on some of the biggest names in sport, as well as breaking down all the latest news in MMA, whether it be upcoming fights, contract negotiations, exciting new prospects, and other times some more lighthearted journalism with the former double champion. Before we get into things, as Ariel pointed out, we're from the same beautiful hometown of Montreal, Canada, and because now I have the opportunity to say this in front of all of my friends and colleagues that are listening from the tri-state area, I just wanted to establish right now just how much better Montreal bagels are than New York bagels. So Ariel, please take it away.
Amen. Oh, without a doubt, not even close. I don't even know what's going on with the New York bagels. It's like they've been injected with steroids. Like they're so fat and like it's like they're so cookie cutter, right? They're all the same size, all very plump. A Montreal bagel, you can tell that it has been handled and crafted with love and care, handcrafted in the oven. I mean, it's night and day, to be honest. So thank you. Yes, thank you for setting me up for that.
You've said that you have a friend of yours in New York that started Black Seed Bagel Company. So if any New Yorkers want to go into the city and get the closest replica to that, please,
Yes.
by any means.
A high school classmate of mine named Noah Burnhamoff at Herzliya High School in Montreal started that company. So yes, good shout out. I highly suggest it. If you want to get, it's not the real deal, but it's the closest thing that I've found to it.
Awesome. All right, so let's jump right into the questions. So we discussed that you had kind of a love-hate relationship with your time at Syracuse, but you spent your time there during the 2003 national championship year. That must have been an electric time to be on campus, especially as a big sports guy. Could you just walk us through what your experience was like at SU?
Yes. All right. So it's a very interesting question, and it's an interesting story if I can explain it. So I grew up loving sports, obviously, and I also grew up loving the magic of sports television. So when I would watch big sporting events on TV, I would be just as captivated by the announcers, by the broadcasters, as I were the players on the court or field. And I grew up trying to emulate these people like Marv Albert, Bob Costas. These were people that I really looked up to and thought that they were amazing at their job. And when my friends and my brothers, 2 older brothers, were playing basketball, in my driveway, things like that, I would pretend to do post-game interviews, all that stuff. I just loved it, but I never really, like as a youngster, never really thought that this was something that I would do for a living. Then I'm in the 9th grade in Montreal in English class, and I'm reading an edition of Sports Illustrated, where they're talking about the best schools in America for X, Y, and Z. And there was a little blurb that stated that Syracuse University was the best school in America for sports broadcasting. And I'm in the 9th grade, so this is 1997, and a light goes off in my head. I'm like, wow, sports broadcasting, you could go to school for something like that and kind of like, hone your craft and go down that path. That's amazing. So I decided right then and there that I was going to go to Syracuse University. I was going to be a student there. I was going to go to Newhouse. And they even listed some of the famous alumni, Bob Costas, Marv Albert, like, wow, this is amazing. This is the place for me. Now, where I grew up in Montreal and in the community that I grew up in, a lot of kids didn't leave Montreal for university. They go to CEGEP, which for us is sort of like what it is, Francois. It's like a junior college, if you will. We graduate from high school in the 11th grade, and then there's 2 years of CEGEP, and then 3 years university. And most of them went to either McGill or Concordia. Those are the top two universities in Montreal, the English-speaking ones at least. And I was the only one of all my friends that left. So I got into Syracuse. I actually didn't get into Newhouse. I got into speech communications my first year in the School of VPA, Visual Performing Arts. And I'll never forget getting the letter. And it was like, congratulations, you got into speech comm. And I was like, what? I didn't apply for speech comm. But I came to find out that that's where, I don't want to call it like the rejects, but, the ones who couldn't get into Newhouse, they
Right.
put us there. But I inquired. And they said that if you get at least a 3.5 GPA, you can apply to transfer to Newhouse. So I said, all right, I'm going to go. Now, this is 2001. I'm very close to my parents. All my friends were home. And I'll be honest, I was very homesick. I miss my family. I miss my friends. It just wasn't something, maybe emotionally, I wasn't ready. I wasn't mature enough. I don't know. But I was very homesick, and I was a very shy young man at the time. I had a lot of social anxiety, which a lot of people can't believe considering what I do for a living. So much so, my first year I lived in Lawrenson Hall
Mhm.
across from the Carrier Dome. And I would wait, especially on weekends, Friday nights, I would wait until I couldn't hear a single person in the hallway, usually 2, 3 a.m., to go out to the bathroom and brush my teeth, to the communal bathroom. That's how much social anxiety I had. I wouldn't go to the cafeteria to eat. I would eat usually alphagettis or sorry, something in my throat. I had a canister of Blue Diamond roasted almonds. I would eat that for dinner because I didn't want to go and interact with other people. That's how nervous I was. So I was dealing with a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
And also, for the first time in my life, I was surrounded by kids who had the same dreams and aspirations as I did, which was to become the next basketball, baseball, football announcer. And I've always been someone who kind of rooted for the underdog, and I didn't like to go down the same path as everyone else. And so I'll never forget, in 2001, this September of 2001, my first month there, I remember telling my parents, there's this sport called mixed martial arts, which at the time wasn't even 8 years old yet. And I feel like at some point it's going to be mainstream. I feel like in 10 years, there's going to be some executive in some office who's going to say, I know nothing about the sport, but who is the guy? Who is the face and voice of MMA? And I want to position myself as the guy. And so initially, because I was a big fan of it, initially when I got to SU, I actually was doing some work at WAER, but I found that it was like, it just wasn't for me. It was a little too like hoity-toity for me. And I know they have developed an immense amount of great talent. So I went to a station called WERW, which was like the student station at the Shine Auditorium in a closet with very primitive equipment. And I did my own combat sports radio show from there every Saturday morning, all that stuff. And that was just kind of my escape. And it was really like the only fun thing that I did for a long time. Yeah, it was fun when they won in 03 and Mello was there and all that stuff. The problem was I didn't really have that many people to celebrate with. And so I kind of felt like left out of the whole thing. I went to the Dome to watch a championship game. I had friends, but no one that I really connected with. It was only my last 2 weeks there that like I let my guard down and I allowed myself to have fun, which was unfortunate, but no regrets. I learned so much. I think back to my first class ever at Syracuse at Newhouse was ethics, journalism ethics. And I think back to a lot of the things that I learned from there. And my professors were great. And a lot of the people that I met as a result of going to Syracuse led me down the path that I'm on now. So I don't have any regrets. But just to tie it all together for you, when I left in 04, when I graduated, because I had such kind of mixed feelings about the experience and I was so homesick and everything, I said, I will never return to Syracuse unless they invite me back, because I used to go to those like speaker series, stuff like this. Costas came back, some other people came back, and I was so like impressed, like, wow, these guys come back to talk to us. And I said, unless they invite me back, I'll never come back to this campus. And thank God in 2004, Newhouse invited me to come back, and I brought my family, and I was able to almost like I don't know, make amends with the relationship with the school and close whatever wounds I had. And ever since then, I feel like my relationship and feelings toward the school a lot better. So this is actually the second time ever since 2004 that I've done anything for the school, and I'm very proud to do so.
Well, the school is wasting a big opportunity and not inviting you back more. We'll say that right now. But so building off that, you said you had your own once that light bulb popped in your head in 2001, and you figured out, okay, I'm going to start my own radio show and trying to get get some more experience myself. Was that the only steps you took to position yourself to improve your broadcasting skills, or did you take from co-curriculars, teachers, have any mentors that really helped you throughout your college career?
So my first year at Syracuse, I worked for WAER. I think every Thursday at 4-ish a.m. That was the shift, and I would go there and I would write like fake, news reports. Never called any games. I was never really interested in play by play. I was more interested in hosting. Um, and so I did that for one semester. For 2 semesters, I worked for Z89, which I presume these stations are still around. That was the music station. Um,
They
is
might
it,
have been. They might be uh, part of the school now. They might have been taken in by the school, but I believe um,
so Z89 was a student station, but it
I
was music. It was
uh,
like top 40.
I think is now under Citrus TV, if I'm not mistaken. But
Okay, so Citrus TV, I've seen that. That wasn't around when I was
right,
when I was there. But Z89 was like a music station, and what I would do, so it was very professionally done. They had like all the music carts and all this stuff. I'm sure it's all digital now, but I would talk. They would want you to speak for like 15 seconds in between like three songs. Every three songs, you like say, "Hey, I'm Ariel," blah blah blah. I would go for like 2-3 minutes and talk about like last night's baseball game. I remember one time like the Yankees were playing the D-backs in the 2001 World Series, and I started talking about Derek Jeter. And then they called me up and they're like, "Yeah, you can't speak for that long. Like you're just there to play music." And so I was like, "Yeah, maybe this isn't for me." So WAER, I actually was there for the entire time, all 3 years. And the first 2 years that I was there, I did a combat sports show called The Main Event. And then the last year that I was there, 0304, I did a general sports show called The Great White Northern Sports Show. So it was like sports with a Canadian twist. No one listened to it. In fact, the phone in the station could only receive calls. So my mom or my 10-year-old sister would call up guests and then call me on conference. And that's how I would do the interviews on the show. And in fact, in 2004, because I was applying for a visa to stay in America and work post graduation, I couldn't go home for spring break. So I actually wrote a letter to the Montreal Expos, who were about to play in their final spring training before leaving Montreal and going to Washington, unfortunately. I wrote them a letter saying that WERW was assigning me to cover their spring training in Melbourne, Florida, and I wanted to go spend a week there and get credentialed and all that stuff. This wasn't true at all, but I had nowhere to go and I didn't want to stay in Syracuse for the week. So they said yes because no one was covering the team, and I got a credential to cover the Expo spring training and go in the locker room and everything. And it was just like the most amazing week of my life.
that's awesome.
So I was able, I got a little crafty in that regard. And there were some teachers like a teacher named professor, excuse me, Dr. Nicholson, John Nicholson, who I don't think is there anymore at Newhouse, and a couple other ones. There's one who's Miss Tina Press, Professor Press was really great to me as well. Who, I felt a connection with. But other than that, I'm not joking when I say I really kept to myself. I didn't spend a lot of time, on Marshall Street at the bars or anything like that. I really just tried to keep to myself, and the radio shows were something that I was very passionate about doing, even though it was Saturday morning and no one was watching or listening.
Right. So going off that, I think that would be a great segue into talking about the networking successes that you had going into the industry. You talk about keeping to yourself. That must mean you had a ton of time to, build relationships with people that once you knew you wanted to get into this industry. What did that look like in college and coming out of college?
Well, so I remember when I was maybe no, I was a junior. They told us about, and I might be messing up the name, but there was like an alumni association, right, for at Newhouse, and basically, like you can go on a computer at Newhouse, and you can either type in someone's name or type in a field, a job, a network, something like that. So I wanted junior year going into senior year, I wanted to get an internship. And so I was very focused. Like I was focused in my first year, I was very focused to get that 3.5 to transfer to Newhouse. Luckily, I got a 3.51, so I just barely made it. And then when I was there, I was very focused. Like, hey, if I'm going to stay at Syracuse and I'm going to be, a little homesick and whatnot, something good is going to come out of this experience. Like, I'm going to get a good job out of college. I'm going to go down the right path. Like, I'm not going to just, you know, sit here and pout for 3 years. I'm actually going to try to make something of myself. So I remember going to that computer and I remember printing out like 40 contact pages of different people in sports media. Some I reached out to, some I heard back. There's a broadcaster named Adam Shine who worked for CBS Sports. I'll never forget. He called me. He was pumping gas, and he called me, and I was like, "Wow, I can't believe this guy's actually calling me." Gave me some advice, but none of the people, the exact people that I reached out to, led to any kind of job. But there was one. So I was a combat sports fan, like I told you, and I looked up HBO Sports. HBO Sports at the time, was broadcasting a lot of boxing. And I sent an email via that website that I got, or that computer system that I was on. It was like info@hbosports.com. It wasn't to a specific person. Sent them an email, told them I'm a big boxing fan. They called me. We spoke a few times, and I got an internship in New York City between my junior and senior year to work at HBO Sports. That was an incredible experience. And so again, who knows if I get that opportunity? Who knows if they bring me on if I'm not a Syracuse student, because there's such a great reputation. And then my first job out of college in 2004 was back at Syracuse. They hired me for a year to work in their documentary department, which was an amazing experience as well. So I tried my best to use those connections as much as possible. And then, of course, the moment you step out into the quote unquote real world, you see that there's a million Syracuse alumni all over the place, and there's a connection there, and that's definitely come up a lot of times over the years.
Right. And so during your stint at HBO, during your internship, did you cover MMA, or did you start, developing this idea that you wanted to cover MMA, surrounded by this great combat sports network?
So while I was at HBO, because at the time HBO was, the leader in boxing. It's amazing now, 17 years later, they don't air boxing anymore. Everyone that I spoke to, from the president at the time, Ross Greenberg, to the vice president of HBO Sports, Rick Bernstein, when I would see important people in the hallways, I would always try to tell them MMA, UFC. This is a sport that should be covered more. It should be on. It should be on HBO, all that stuff and more. But obviously, no one really listened to me seriously, because who the hell was I? But my real, like, sort of my journey being an MMA reporter really began in 2007. And so what happened was, 2004, I graduated from Syracuse. For a year, I work at HBO Sports, so '04 to '05. HBO wanted to keep me, but unfortunately, my visa ran out, and the HR department said, because I was so low on the totem pole, you can hire an American with similar experience. I was a PA, a production assistant. I had to leave. So that was kind of heartbreaking, in the beginning of many different setbacks that I had throughout my career so far. Luckily, I got a job working on a TV show on ESPN Classic, the network, and I worked for a production company from '05 to mid '07. Then at the time, Spike TV was the home of the UFC, the network Spike TV, which is now the Paramount Network. And my goal was like, all right, I'm going down this production route. I'm not doing anything on camera. I'm not I'm not a name, but I'm enjoying production for the most part. Spike TV is the home of the UFC. Maybe I can combine the two worlds, be in production and also work for the network that airs UFC content. So I applied for a job at Spike TV in '07. I got the job in September of '07, and I was there for 1 week. And I realized very quickly this job isn't for me. I didn't really realize at the time, but I learned after the week there that the UFC produced all their own content, not Spike TV. And so we weren't really doing anything creative. It was very administrative, and that's not really my thing. So after a week there, I went into the office of the president of Spike TV Sports at the time, a guy named Brian Diamond, and I said, and tough decision. You just get hired. I'm 25. I said, I don't think that this job is for me. And, I'd like to leave. He was
Probably,
very upset.
probably getting told this is a big mistake, right?
He said it was the biggest mistake of my life. He said it was very unprofessional. I would live to regret it. And can't believe I'm doing this. You need to rethink this, all this stuff. And I just knew in my heart that this wasn't the place for me. And so they kept me there for a month and a half until they can find someone to replace me. My job was a production coordinator. And it was during that time that I decided, all right, this is the crossroads of my career, my life. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to try to be an MMA journalist because at that point, I'm a huge fan of the sport. I don't feel like the sport is being covered the right way. There aren't a lot of people covering it in a professional way. So what I did was I started my own website from that cubicle at Spike. And I said, okay, I'm going to give myself 6 months to get noticed. And my goal was every morning at 8 a.m., I was going to post an audio interview with a fighter because I love interviewing fighters. And I love interviewing people, period. But fighters are just really interesting people to talk to, in my opinion. So every morning at 8 a.m., I was going to post an audio interview with a fighter. And this is really before podcasts. So like you could press on it on the website. I had like a WordPress plugin and people could listen to it that way. And the way that I was going to reach out to the fighters was via MySpace, because that was the social media site du jour. Like Facebook wasn't really being used, Twitter wasn't a thing, so MySpace was what I was going to use. And it started in October of 2007, and my deadline was April 1st of 2008. If I didn't get a job by April 1st, 2008, I would go back to TV production. At the time, I'm living in New York City. I'm obviously not getting paid. I got engaged to my future wife. And for 6 months, I just poured everything into that site. I didn't care if 10 people went to the site or 10 million. I just was kind of using it as an online resume. I wanted to show people what I could do. So when I would get, and by the way, big names were starting to write back to me. Like, at the time, names like Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz, George St. Pierre, they were writing back to me. So I would have interviews with those guys. And then I would send them out to different people and be like, hey, look who I spoke to. And hopefully they were starting to realize that I can, be a good interviewer. Unfortunately, come March of 2008, so now with 1 month left on my deadline, I was running out of time and I had no job. So I started to look for jobs back in production. I really wanted to stay true to my deadline. I couldn't just do this forever for free. Thankfully, with 3 days left on my deadline, a guy who was starting his own a site for the Wasserman Media Group, which is a big, agency. The site was mmarated.com. They found my stuff. They called me up. They asked me if I wanted to come work for them and really run the site. And he asked me, how much do you want to get paid? Which is a tricky question because like someone says, how much you want to get paid? You say $5, they were willing to pay you $10. Now you just left money on the table. But what I did was I took the number that I was making at Spike and I doubled it just to see if I could prove to that guy that I didn't make a mistake. And they said yes. And so in April of 2008, that's when the journey began. Unfortunately, the journey lasted 6 months and we were doing really well. The site did great. I was starting to get notoriety. I was doing on-camera interviews. I wanted to just cover the sport in a professional manner, get dressed up, wear a suit and tie, stuff like that. And unfortunately, in October of 2008, they sold the site to a different company. They sold their entire web division to a different company. And the new company kept all the sites that they had except for one, and it was my MMA site because they didn't want to be in the MMA business. So as I'm in it for 6 months. Now I'm out of it. It took me several months. And then March and April of 2009, I got two new jobs, one with AOL Fan House and one with versus.com, the TV network, which became NBCsports.com. And, since then it's been, I won't say smooth sailing because it certainly hasn't been at times, but that, the journey has continued for over a decade now.
Well, that's an amazing story. I mean, just the showing how setting personal goals and personal quotas can, motivate you to, build your own personal brand, get your, talents and get your skills out there, practice your skills, and, really show the world what you have to offer. Going off of that, what you said when you were talking about interviewing fighters and that being your favorite thing, you've had the opportunity to work with some of the greatest athletes in the sport. How have these interactions helped you grow your personal brand? And are there interactions with athletes in your career that you've had that really you find separate your work from other sports journalists in other leagues?
Well, it's a tough question to answer because, I think personally, I don't maybe get the recognition for this, but like, I think and I think we should all think of ourselves in this regard at some point. Like, I think I'm the best interviewer in sports, but maybe not everyone knows it yet. So I feel like I've come a long way, from that kid who was very shy at Syracuse to getting more comfortable on camera behind the microphone. If I look at some of my early stuff, yeah, obviously I'm not as confident behind the microphone as I am now. But, I think part of what has helped me develop a great relationship with the fans is that they have seen me grow up and evolve in front of their eyes. Like, I didn't come from another sport or another network and just get plopped into the MMA world. I really have grown up in front of them. And I think there's a connection as a result of that. And then over time, when you start to talk to athletes and follow their careers and cover them in a fair and honest way, you start to develop relationships with them. Like Daniel Cormier, who I do the show with, I met him when he made his MMA debut. He didn't know me, I didn't know him. And over time, we just developed a great relationship. And there's a ton of other fighters that I can name as well. Obviously, a notable one is Connor. For all the interviews that we did together, and the respect and the way I treat him and the way he treats me, it's a great thing. And again, there's millions, not millions, but hundreds of those guys that I've talked to now over the years. And I just try to be as respectful and trustworthy as possible. Like, for me, trust is the main thing. If a fighter doesn't trust you, or an athlete or a subject doesn't trust you, that you're going to use the information that they give you in the right way, then they have like they have no reason to come to you, right? Like, then myself as a reporter has nothing. If someone calls me and tells me something off the record, and if there's a seed of doubt in their mind that is he really going to keep this off the record, or is he going to go tell other people, I'm done. So you have to have that trust. You have to be that vault. And that's very, very important for me, and something that I take a lot of pride in. And also, like, when they do an interview with you, they know that, yeah, you'll ask quote unquote tough questions, but you're not going to like be unfair or blindside them, hit them below the belt, things like that. So that stuff has been very, very important to me. And just trying to, develop those relationships and trying to be that voice for not only the sport, but the fighters. And, over time, just myself getting more comfortable being myself in front of camera. Like, at first you're trying to almost like, be the guy that you see in other people, and you don't really let people, learn about who you are and truly get a sense for who you are. I think this year I've come a long way as well, especially doing stuff from home. This year with the pandemic and everyone, going through a tough time, I've really taken it upon myself as almost like a task to provide entertainment and to provide a relief and escape for people as much as possible. And sometimes that means having fun, joking around, just trying to give people a reason to smile and to think about something else. And, I'm not, sometimes people think that I'm like this square, very serious guy, serious journalist, but like, I'm kind of I'm really not that, but I've just, I took my job so seriously and I tried to be so professional that I didn't allow people to see me with my guard down. I think this year I've allowed people to see me in that light. So I really pride myself on trying to be the best interviewer in the sport and in sports, but also being very dynamic as well, in the sense that I think I can host, I can interview, I could be an analyst, I could break news. I could do podcast, video, write. I think it's very important to be able to do all kinds of things and provide people with different kinds of content. So it's a great time to be a journalist because of the internet and because of the ability that we have online. Obviously, it's a little bit different these days because of less in-person stuff, but it's just been an incredible journey for, someone who kind of grew up on the internet with a sport that was growing up in front of our eyes as well. I feel very fortunate that I was allowed to kind of grow up alongside the sport.
That's a great point. I mean, you talk about, from your perspective, the changes in writing, interviewing, and reporting throughout 2020, and diversifying your journalistic talent or your skills in different areas and different platforms, what's available. And I think that's a must for sharpening skills, and saving 2020s like you did for mine. Being that source of entertainment, being someone who gets their product and gets their brand out there during a time where it's much needed for the world. So when we're talking about changes in interviewing and writing and reporting, especially in the UFC. From my perspective, having watched a lot this year, I've seen a lot of current fighters in broadcasting roles, and I wanted to get your idea on how you feel the UFC's developed in implementing its athletic talent into its broadcasting roles, and why other leagues aren't able to do so as consistently.
So yeah, that's a really good question. The UFC historically has done a really good job of this. I mean, dating back to the mid 2000s, they would, they for the longest time they had Mike Goldberg and Joe Rogan on the broadcast, but they would even have Randy Couture pop in, and that was really good. Kenny Florian would pop in, and he did really well. And now, since the Fox deal and now the ESPN deal with the pre and post shows and so many events, there haven't been any duds, right? Like they bring in Michael Bisping, he does great. They bring in Dominic Cruz, great. DC, great. Paul Felder, great. The list goes on and on. And there's never been a situation where, and they test them out beforehand, so they're not just like throwing them on the air without any preparation. At least for me, there hasn't been a situation where someone went on the air and just completely bombed. And the reason there's a few reasons why you don't see this in other sports. Number one, let's say, just for the sake of the conversation, James Harden wants to do something like this. Well, it's really hard for him in the midst of a season to then just step out and work for NBA on ESPN or NBA on TNT, right? Because he's in the midst of his own season as well. And then when the season's over, there's nothing else going on. In our sports, in the fight game, someone like Kamaru Usman is fighting once this year, twice maybe. So there's 40 something events that he could work on, right? So it's just the way the sport is structured as opposed to other sports. Now we have seen situations where someone doesn't make the playoffs and then they do guest appearance, like Dwayne Wade did this for ABC a few years ago. Kobe did it for TNT several years back. You see that, but you fairly rarely see it obviously during the regular season, and it doesn't happen too often because guys want to relax and start training again and whatnot. So MMA and boxing are perfect for this. Like last week I was watching the Errol Spence versus Danny Garcia boxing match, and Sean Porter was at the desk, and he's an active fighter and he did great. And you don't get a chance to see that. I think there was a football player last year, Greg Olson, who did one NFL game for Fox on a bye week. So you'll see things like that, but usually it's not very common. So the fight game is perfect for it, and the UFC has done a really good job of choosing the right guys. And you could get a sense. I mean, you have a pretty good idea based on their personality, on their interviews, who could be good and who could be not. And by the way, the UFC guys, especially the ones who are in the booth calling the events, they don't get enough credit, and especially the play-by-play guys. Like they're doing 7-hour shows. That's 2 football games, and very few breaks. And then like the pay-per-views 3 straight hours, like 0 breaks. So that job is incredibly taxing with a ton of fighters, right? Like usually 12 or so fights, 20, that's 24 fighters. So it's a really tough job. And I think that for the most part, they have picked the right guys and have done a great job in developing those talents.
That's a great point. And I know you touched on when Kobe Bryant was injured a few years ago, he did a bit, I don't remember when, TNT or something like that. Do you think other leagues should push more for, as unfortunate as injuries are, to push for their current athletic talent who they would think would be good in a broadcasting role to pop in for a game or two during their injury, during a bye week, like you said, during football?
Yeah, I think it could be good. The other issue is like these sports have set teams, right? And so like if you could bring in a guy for one game and it's not the biggest deal, but you know, first of all, chemistry is tough, but number two, it's just like hard to kind of wedge someone in there. So like in football, I think it works because you'll have a slate of like 8 games and you could put in a Greg Olson on the 6th game that's not getting a ton of attention. And maybe you need someone for that week. It's a little different when you have, an NBA on TNT doubleheader and like you already have the teams and where you're going to put that guy. Like, yeah, you could put him in the studio, but you already have 4 great guys in the studio over there, as opposed to in the UFC where every week it's like a rotation of guys. There's no real set. And by the way, I think you can make a case that maybe it would benefit them to have a set team because the more those guys, like I think the TNT guys are the best team in sports in large part because they've been working together for so long and they know, how to push each other's buttons and how to work together. And so it's tough when you have this, revolving door of talent.
Yeah.
So yes, to a degree, but also I do think there is something to be said for consistency and keeping the same core group, because I think that that makes for a better product.
That makes all the sense. So knowing this year how dynamic the UFC schedule has been, especially during the this COVID era where fight cancellations and rebookings are ever so prominent, how have what are some of the challenges that you see and face in light of these constant changes, and how has that affected your work during this time?
Well, obviously, initially, I couldn't go to the studio anymore, right? So the last time I was in the studio in Bristol, Connecticut was March 9th.
Wow.
Um, and you know, all of a sudden they're like, all right, you can't come in anymore, and no one can come in. So like there's no control room, you don't have all the, the bells and whistles to work with and all that stuff. And I really had to start like thinking, okay, like so I've been doing this Monday afternoon show for 11 years. And to me, it's like a staple of the sport. And I have, the biggest names and the winners from the past weekend on and all this stuff. And it's going to be kind of tough to do it the way I used to do it. So, and now, with Zoom and there's like so much has happened, right? Like the technology has come such a long way in the past 9 months, but very early on, like I was like, okay, I could do something on Instagram Live. That's kind of easy, but that kind of ran its course. So the week before, um, Daniel Cormier and I had been talking for the last couple of years about when he retired that we would do a show together, because we have a really great relationship and we just felt like we could do a show together. So the week before was UFC 248 in Las Vegas, Israel Adesanya against Yoel Romero, and DC made a deal with ESPN that the Thursday before every pay-per-view, starting with that one in March, we would do DC and Helwani on ESPN radio. So we did one show on ESPN radio in Vegas together before that pay-per-view. So a couple days later, that's when the pandemic happens. And then we're wondering, what do we do on Mondays, this and that. And I said to them, why don't we just do DC and Helwani as a placeholder until we can figure everything out? Now I'll be honest, doing that Monday show that, was once 5, 6 hours long, and all the guests that I would have and all that stuff, it was starting to wear on me a little bit. I was the one booking all the guests. If there's 10, 12 guests on the show, I'm the one booking, I'm coordinating. Most hosts aren't doing that, but maybe because I'm a control freak, a little bit crazy, I just like to do it all myself. And it was starting to get a little much, and I was kind of losing my love for it. Also, they moved the show to Bristol, which is 2 hours away from where I live. And that commute was kind of killing me a little bit, like 4 hours in the car before and after the show. So I said, why don't we do this as a placeholder on Mondays, DC and I. And in the back of my mind, I knew the show would do well. I didn't know how they would receive it. And so over the first few weeks, we started doing the show, and the fans were really enjoying it. It was just kind of two buds talking. One of them happens to be one of the best fighters of all time, who, by the way, is about to fight in his retirement fight in August. So he's very relevant, all this stuff. And then a couple of months into it, they said, it's going really well. The numbers are up, the downloads are up, all this stuff. And we talked about whether or not that would be the new Monday show. And I was thrilled when I found out about this, because I was kind of, jonesing for a change on Mondays. And I was afraid to do the change because I didn't want to let down the fans. But now we were kind of forced to do the change. And I found out that the fans liked it. And so it ended up being great. And then on Wednesdays, I would do like a mini version of the Monday show that I was doing with the interviews. So I still wanted to do the interviews, but we just kind of swapped them, and Mondays became with DC. Obviously, doing it from a spare bedroom in my house, not traveling, not being in a studio, it doesn't look as good, it doesn't sound as good. And that concerned me a little bit. But one thing that I've learned this year is that, the fans, they get it. And as long as you continue to deliver the content, they don't really mind all that much. I haven't really gotten complaints about the look and the sound and all that stuff, even though it's not like top notch quality. So that's been very good as well. And like I said, I've just tried to give people an escape and entertainment. I haven't taken a week off this year. I'm looking forward to doing that in December, or later on this month, because it's been a long year. But I really took it upon myself to try to be there for the fans as much as possible. The biggest change, in addition to all of that, was that I haven't traveled to any events. Some people think it's my decision. Some people think it's the UFC's decision. It's neither's. It's ESPN's decision. Um, None of us have traveled at ESPN who cover MMA to events. My colleague Brett lives in Las Vegas, so when there's local events, he gets to go. He's lucky, but he hasn't been to Fight Island. No one went to the Jacksonville events in May. It's just a Disney thing that they're trying to limit the travel as much as possible. So I hope to go back to events in 2021. I miss them. I miss the fans. I miss the buzz of the arena, the energy in the arena. I miss all that stuff, the interaction with the fighters. I mean, you really don't know what you have until it's gone. I mean, it's been said in so many different ways, but I miss it dearly, and I'm looking forward to that. But honestly, I feel like we adapted, we overcame the obstacles, and I'm very, very, very proud of the way we were able to deliver for the fans this year.
Absolutely, and it's looking like Poirier McGregor in January will have fans in Abu Dhabi, which is hopeful. So that's looking good.
Mhm.
I would just want to say it's got to be great to have a Monday show with DC where you don't have to do minimal prep and just kind of laid back discussion, and
Oh,
fans eat up all day and
it's a dream, man. It's like you sit down there, and before we even start taping, we're laughing and cracking jokes and making fun of each other, and then we get to talk. And my only complaint, honestly, is that I feel like it's too short, but they want us to be around an hour and change. But yes, what a difference from stressing. Like, I would stress so much on Sunday about getting the biggest names after the fights, all that stuff, and this is just completely different, and at least right now, way more enjoyable.
nice. So to finish off our questions, you've been great so far to us, and we're gonna jump into the Q&A right after this. But the last of my questions, I'm sure there's a ton of people asking this that want to ask this themselves. In this ever more competitive environment that is entering the sports industry, what is your advice to one of the listeners who's maybe struggling to narrow down interests, find an internships or other?
Yeah, so obviously have a lot of advice. The first thing obviously I would suggest is, what is your dream job, right? Like, locate what that is. Um I always ask people this who ask me, I don't know what to do. I love sports. I love broadcasting, whatever. So what's the dream job? Like, what is the pinnacle? Like the absolute dream job? And they'll tell me, and I'll say, all right, good. Now you know what the dream job is. Now you know what to shoot for. Because I was talking to a neighbor of mine, and we were having this conversation. He said his dream is to be the general manager of the New York Giants. I said, great. In 10, 15, 20 years, when you're at the appropriate age with the appropriate experience, why can't you be the general manager of the Giants? Someone has to have that job. Why can't it be you? Why, how did I become one of the faces of ESPN's MMA coverage, like this Jewish kid from Montreal? That doesn't happen, right? So you dream big and you go after those dreams. And then while you're dreaming and while you're trying to target those dreams, you look around at what other people are doing. Like I did. I looked around at MMA and I was like, you know what? No one's covering this sport that I love the right way. No one's serving me as a fan. No one's showing up to, they would show up to events wearing fighter t-shirts and holding camcorders, and it just wasn't professional. It wasn't being covered like the other major sports. So I looked around at what everyone was doing and I tried to be different. Right. And so I felt like, like sometimes students will reach out to me and they'll be like, hey, I have this website and I'm covering whatever. Can you look at my stuff? And it's, a bunch of game recaps or fight recaps. And I say, this is great. You're a great writer, but why is anyone going to come to you? There's already people who do that, right? So you try to be different, and you try to create your own lane. And then once you start to get in the mix, very, very important to always be professional. Work your butt off, be professional, be omnipresent. Something that I really believe in is 80% of success is just showing up. Just show up. Never say no to an opportunity, even if maybe you don't feel like it and you're nervous about it, whatever. Just show up, because you never know who you're going to meet, what it's going to lead to. Just be there. So early in my career, I just wanted to try to show up to every event possible, because I wanted people to know that when there's a big event, I'm going to be there, right? And so once you do that and you're professional and you're different, good things are going to happen. And you need to use the internet now to your advantage. So yeah, there's a ton of competition, and yeah, there's a lot of people trying to do the same thing, but like, you can interview the biggest names in whatever field via Zoom or via whatever other device that you're using. That wasn't always easy. Trust me. It was like now you literally send a guy a link, you press record, and voila, you have a video interview. You know how hard it was to do video interviews from home 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So you're very lucky that the technology has advanced to this point. So do what I did, reach out to people, talk to people, find your lane, be professional. And I would also suggest and let you know that it will not be easy, that it's going to be tough, that there will be obstacles, that you will feel down, that you will feel like the world is out to get you, and that you might not make it and all this stuff. And I would highly suggest to not feel sorry for yourself, not give up, not lick your wounds, not feel like the world is out to get you, because trust me, there have been a lot of times where I felt like I was getting kicked while I was down and it was unfair and all this stuff. And the one thing that I refused to let myself do was feel sorry for myself. Anytime someone wronged me in my eyes, it gave me more motivation to prove everyone wrong. And so, people ask me, how do I get to ESPN? You're a junior in college. Trust me, ESPN's not calling tomorrow for you, but they will call in 4 years or 5 years or 2 years. Or be patient. It's going to come. It took me 16 years to get to ESPN, right? It's not going to happen overnight. Be patient, work your butt off, be professional, be different. Good things will happen.
I love that. That's unbelievable advice. And for those that don't know, one of my favorite Ariel stories is his first interview and first meeting with Daniel Cormier when he was still at Strikeforce. Ariel's laptop broke right before his first interview, and he had to rush to the Manhattan Apple store to get that interview done. Just goes to show your niche may not always be comfortable, and things will get in your way, and you will have challenges. Push through them. Don't take no for an answer. Show up, whether as much as you don't want to. Those are all great things, and we're very lucky to have having some advice like that from you.
Thank you, and I appreciate you knowing that.
It's a rare story, but had to know the first time even at DC.
Thank you.
So jumping into the Q&A, we have a ton of questions. We have just over 40 people participating in today. We have questions from our organization. We have questions from people who are viewing from the school, and we have questions from people that tuned in from Instagram. So we're going to be narrowing them down. We're going to be, going through them relatively quickly, and you can give a brief response. You can go into detail, whatever you need.
No problem.
So Alex Guo asks, when it comes to certain leadership styles, what media company that you worked for, Fox, NBC, ESPN, Watchmen, whichever, had a leadership style that you enjoyed or impressed you the most, and why?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I'm not just saying it because I'm there now, but my boss at ESPN is a guy named Glenn Jacobs, and I really like his style because he's very human. He's not your typical executive who just wants. One of the first things he told me was like, hey, and this year I didn't really listen to him, but he's like, you can take time off. It's okay. If you're not feeling good, don't come. If you're tired and want to take a Monday off, it's okay. Like, we'll be here. No one's good, because I put a lot of pressure on myself. So, he's like, vacations are very important to us around here, stuff like that. And I always appreciated that about him. He's just kind of like a human guy and a down to earth guy. So I like that. I will say, did not like the experience at Fox at all. Was quite the opposite. They let me go. They fired me, no fault of my own. After I was there for 4.5 years, never did anything wrong. It was because the UFC, asked them to let me go. I got a 2.5-minute phone call, and that was it. It was very impersonal. I didn't feel like they cared about me. I didn't feel like they looked out for me. On the flip side, ESPN, there have been issues with the UFC naturally, and they have always had my back. They have always supported me unequivocally. So I will say that, one story that I'll say about like leadership style and something that'll always stick with me. In 2017, I was hired to be a part of the Showtime broadcast for the Mayweather McGregor World Tour. So they were going to have 4 stops in LA, Toronto, Brooklyn, and London. And they had hired me as like the MMA guy to be a part of it. And that was very exciting, right? Mayweather McGregor was such a big deal. Showtime, this is awesome. Well, the day before we were going to have the first one in LA, Dana White found out, raised hell, and made all kinds of threats, and they were forced to take me off the broadcast, and this was devastating. So I flew from New York to LA red eye on a Monday night after doing my show, get to LA late Monday night, early Tuesday, go to the arena the next day, Staples Center. I'm wearing my suit. I'm at the hotel right next door to the arena. And Steven Espinoza, who's the head of Showtime Sports, calls me and says, "Hey, can you meet with me a few minutes before? Like, we're literally about to go to the arena to do the first show." Sits with me. I had never worked for Showtime in my life. Had some brief interactions with Steven, hardly knew him. Sat with me face to face and said, "This is what happened. I'm really sorry. We fought, but we couldn't get it done. So we're going to have to remove you. But I want to let you know that we're going to pay you for everything. We're really sorry. And we're hoping that we can work with you in the future." I'm like, "I don't even know you. And you handled this situation way better than Fox did. You're paying me for everything. You're doing this face to face, man to man. You didn't have to do this. You could have called me up as well." So that's something that I'll always remember and always appreciate from Steven. Like that first job that I had at Wasserman, MMA Rated. Again, I poured everything into that site, and I got a G chat. G chat, like on your Gmail, you could have like a chat. I don't know. I got a G chat that the site was closing down. I couldn't even get a phone call. So like these things stick with you, and they fire you up, and you want to prove people wrong, and you want to prove people that you make mistakes. So for me, I would just say like being a human, being personal, and having feelings go a long way. And these are the things, and these are the people that you want to fight for and deliver for, right? Not the people who ask and want, and are very impersonal. And at least for me, that's what's really resonated.
As a leader, it sounds like transparency is the big key for you, and just
Huge.
not
Being,
leaving
yes,
people out of the
you know
dark.
what, you nailed it, man. Because there have been people who have lied to me, and it really bugs me a lot, and it's something that is hard to get over. So yes, transparency.
Interesting. Okay. So we'll get into some lighter questions. I think we can do a 2-in-1 here. This is, fun to know. What has been your favorite card to cover of all time, and who's your favorite fighter?
Oh my, favorite card. That is a tough one. I'll tell you, like the ones that have stood out, like UFC 112 in Abu Dhabi was a very memorable one for me because it was their first show in Abu Dhabi. It was their first show that was outdoors. If you may recall, Anderson Silva kind of acted really weird in that fight, and Dana White got really mad at him afterwards. And I did an interview with Dana White afterwards, and it was the first interview that I ever did that got over 1 million views on YouTube. So that was like a really big moment for me. Getting to cover an event in Japan for the first time, UFC 144, was really special. Anytime I got to cover an event in Montreal was really special. UFC 97, 124, the first Toronto event, 129 at the Skydome Rogers Center, was really special as well. And really, like, the international events are great. Going to Australia, going to London, and one that always stood out to me also was getting to go to Dublin for Connor's first
Oh, wow.
UFC event there in Ireland was incredible. Like the energy in that building was just out of this world. So those are some that come to mind. And as far as favorite fighters are concerned, I really tried to be unbiased and not have favorites. I'll tell you, my first favorite fighter as a fan was a guy named David Loiseau, who's from Montreal, who went to Dawson College, who some friends of mine were in class with. So like there was a guy fighting for the UFC belt in the mid 2000s, and he's from Montreal, and he like went to the same school as some of my friends, and I thought that was really cool. He was a teammate of George St. Pierre's. And obviously, I'd be lying if I didn't say that, I obviously rooted for George before I became a journalist. I tried to keep it unbiased, but he is the pride of Montreal, and he did so well for Canada and for my city that he's someone that I held in high regard. But then over time, it's like you just develop relationship with guys, DC being one of them, Demetrius Johnson, Chris Weidman. There have been some guys who have been very loyal to me and have been very good to me. And in turn, I've tried to be very good to them as well.
Interesting. So, in your opinion, Jordan Hakami asks, are YouTuber fights turning into boxing, or turning boxing into gimmicks and celebrity fights, or creating a new generation of fans?
I personally think that they're creating a new generation. You have to view it for what it is. Jake Paul is 2-0. No one is claiming that he can beat Canelo, right? He's fighting guys who are YouTubers, athletes, and maybe slowly but surely he's going to work his way up. But I find it so funny when the boxing media and the purists get all upset about this sort of thing, because it's like, it's not a black eye on the sport. First of all, Jake Paul is taking it seriously. Like, if you watch Jake Paul and you don't think that he's taking it seriously based on his skills and the way he fights, you're just ignoring what's in front of you, because the guy has skills, right? He
Can
has
we can we camps on top of it? Like they are taking this seriously.
Absolutely. Yeah, with real coaches and all this stuff. So it doesn't bother me. Like, things like Floyd versus Logan Paul doesn't bother me at all as well, because I know what it is. It's pretty much like a pro wrestling match. It's a fake exhibition.
Mhm.
I'm not going to lose, breath and mental space getting worked up about these things, because guess what? Boxing is doing really well right now. There's been a lot of great boxing fights as of late. There's another one this weekend involving Anthony Joshua, and next weekend Canelo's coming back, and Triple G is coming back, and Ryan Garcia is fighting in January. Like, there's a lot of and they're just, Errol Spence just fought, and Lomachenko against Lopez, and on it goes. So boxing is doing just fine. And if people want to get fixated on these YouTube fights, whatever, I think it's actually bringing in younger fans. Like, these guys could be doing anything. They're actually taking the time to learn how to develop, how to become a fighter and all this stuff. Like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Like, now, if they're booking Jake Paul versus Canelo, yeah, that's weird, because there's a massive discrepancy there in terms of talent and experience. But these things are fine, and like the Tyson thing was fun, and everyone was whining about it, and no one got hurt, and it was totally fine. So I don't mind it. I don't feel like it's a black eye, and I think that if you could get newer fans interested in the sport, great.
Brings in a ton of pay-per-view on top of that, right?
Yep.
So this is an interesting one. Ryan Hartfeld asks, so the UFC being one of the few sports to display betting odds, why do you think the relationship between the gambling industry and combat sport has synergized better than other leagues?
Great question. And I think we have seen this really come to light this year. For example, when the UFC came back in May, there was nothing going on, right? Like, they were very adamant on being one of the first sports to come back. And then May, June, early part of July, like, there was nothing going on in sports, right? There were no other events. And I know this firsthand from neighbors, from cousins who never spoke to me about MMA, never spoke to me about the fights at all. Now all of a sudden they're asking me about, like, the Michelle Watterson random fight that's going on this weekend and stuff like that. Why? Because they were getting into daily fantasy and betting and things like that. And it's so, like, you have a card with 12 fights and you could pick your guys and all this stuff. Like, it's just so perfect for something like that, right? I mean, it's just basically like one big parlay. And the fact that they've leaned in on it, I think, is very smart. It's Vegas, of course. Like, it all just kind of is synergized, and it makes all the sense in the world. But I just think, much like how football is very easy to do fantasy for, because it's like all in a nice little neat package on Sunday and, Monday, Thursday, whatever. But like, most of it is on Sunday, and you can watch all the games and kind of be done with it. I feel like it's the same with UFC. It's all on Saturday. You watch it all one day, one night, and it's very fun. And especially when they came back and there was nothing going on for 2.5 months, and people were jonesing for sports, and they were jonesing for something to get their mind off of things, and to bet, and to have fun, and to have some sort of interaction with others, and to have something to look forward to. It was perfect. I mean, and I really think that has led to an influx of new fans and more interest in the sport. And I was questioning their motives to come back. And I still, like, let's be honest, I don't think their only motive to come back was just to be the first. I mean, there was definitely, financial reasons why they wanted to come back. They had incentive to come back, but it ended up paying off. And I think they've developed a lot of new fans. And I think a lot of new fans realize that, hey, this is a great sport to bet on, and now they're starting to enjoy it, in that regard.
Right. I like that idea that the, like, kind of similar to football Sundays, the fluidity of a fight card, similar to football, just makes it easier to lay out, watch consecutively for bettors. It's a lot better than, watching a 9 inning baseball game, putting your bet down and waiting
Right.
how much time the game needs to finish. A fight is an early prelim up until just the main event is only 15 minutes at most, right? So quick and easy outcome, great incentive to get into the sport. I know I'm guilty as charged, but I'm grateful that wasn't just the first thing I looked at, and I actually got into the sport. So a couple interesting fights and that people want your takes. Alphon Yildiz asks, what is your opinion on the greater pound for pound fighter, Khabib or John Jones?
Oh, well, I would
And I
say,
know you don't like, I know you don't like giving out your opinions on
yeah.
fighters, but
No, well, I would say you forgot about George St. Pierre because I would put him in that discussion as well. If you just look at the resume and what they've done in the sport, John Jones has had the more impressive career. However, he did test positive for PDs on 2 occasions, so it's hard to ignore that. So it's up to you. If you want to include PD users, then to me, it's John Jones. If you don't want to include PD users, then to me, it's George St. Pierre, who won belts in 2 different weight classes, avenged his only 2 losses, went out on top. And then there's Khabib, who wasn't champion as long, but retired at least for now at 29-0, which is an unbelievable thing, and lost 2 rounds and all that stuff. They would be 1-2. Anderson in his prime was great, but also Anderson Silva tested positive. Demetrius Johnson should be included as well, in my opinion. Fedor Emelianenko should be included as well. So those are some of the names as far as greatest of all time are concerned. But I just have a hard time saying the greatest of all time is someone who tested positive twice. If that doesn't mean anything to you, I don't know how you can argue against John Jones.
yeah, obviously the most decorated fighter, in my opinion, to come out of the sport to hold on to that light heavyweight title for as long as he did. Um, I want to know, what is your relationship with Dana White, and what are some of the fighters that you think will be, being cut in the upcoming cuts?
So I would say that my relationship with Dana White is non-existent, which is unfortunate because of who he is and how powerful he is in the sport. But I have not had a conversation with Dana White since the day that he banned me in 2016 when he escorted me out of the forum in Inglewood. He personally didn't escort me. He told someone else to escort. But like we had a conversation obviously right before that. Uh I've not talked to him since. I've not had any conversation with him since. Um and that's a bummer because we had a really great relationship prior to that. I mean, he was very accessible to me and gave me a lot of great stuff, and it was just really great to be in his good standing. But I think I've proven over the past 4+ years that um, it's okay. I could still do the job very well, and I could still hold my spot as I think one of the top guys in the sport. So, um, yeah, I would just label it as non-existent. And as long as they let me like continue to do my job, I don't really care. You know what I mean? It's actually, in some ways, I would argue, has actually benefited me, the current relationship status. As far as the guys getting cut, I mean, it's very hard to speculate. I mean, I think that you all you have to do is look at like the guys in the sort of the names who might be on the tail end of their career, who are expensive, quote unquote, guys like that, a former champion that might be hanging on that hasn't looked great. I don't want to like say a name because I feel like that's unfair to them. I would say I think there's a couple of them fighting on this card on Saturday on the main card. And I'm not referring to Tony Ferguson, but some others on the main card that I think that could be on the chopping block if they lose. But people are making a lot of this news that they're going to let go of 60 to 80 fighters. They've done this in the past. They've let go of 50 or so fighters in the past. They go through this, but they've signed so many fighters recently because of the Contender Series and the pandemic that it was bound to happen. And so, yeah, I think you're going to see more names like Yoel Romero, like Anthony Johnson, who will no longer be part of the UFC, but the UFC will be fine. The top tier guys aren't going anywhere. It's just like those those middle to lower tier guys who were once great, but maybe they feel like can't really generate a lot of money these days.
Right. Ariel, I just want to say I can't thank you enough for being on the show today. This was an unbelievable experience for not only just me, but I'm sure the multiple people that were listening, the multitude of people that were listening. Unbelievable experience to have, to be able to just talk to you and break your job down, your career experience down, your time at SU down. It's been a learning experience on journalism, on the combat sports industry that many people, might not know about. And I just want to wish you the best of luck with everything for the rest of the year. Please take that break that you most certainly deserve. And we hope to be in touch with you soon.
I appreciate that. Like I said to you before, this was an honor for me. I was very excited when you reached out and excited to do it. And I want to wish everyone happy holidays and all the best in 2021 for everyone and your families. And hopefully, you'll bring us a lot better cheer than this year. And keep in touch. I'd love to help out any way I can. And I wish everyone, a great new year and hopefully an even better 2021. So thank you so much, Francois. And again, great to talk to a fellow Montrealer at Syracuse. I feel like this is kind of like, the whole story is coming together here. Speaking to a student at Syracuse from Montreal, you were in my shoes, or I was in your shoes many moons ago. It's a beautiful thing. So again, thank you, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Full circle. Ariel, thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
All right, take care.
Take care.